Welcome to this latest episode of our podcast, Two Heads Are Better Than One, where we are going to discuss the actual election manifestos as pertaining to education. We did our own last time round, Cameron.
We did, and they were much better than anything we're going to be talking about today. But it's a bit late to organise the Rod and Grant Party and Sweet to Power and End Democracy. So improve the schools. But still, what we're going to be talking about today are the policies of the six main parties. And it's going to be complicated here at the Rod Grant Studios because our team of technicians are running about in a great haste because we've got some recordings to play for you of actual politicians talking about actual policies. So we'll just see how that goes.
Well, we thought, to ensure no bias here, we would just do the parties alphabetically. So we'll hear first from the Conservatives' Stephen Kerr, and this is what Stephen told us.
Look, let's be straight about this. Scotland's schools have gone backwards. We were once regarded as being among the best. Now we're pretty average. That didn't just happen. That's the result of years of poor policy and a system that's lost its way. So what we're going to do about it, we're going to get back to basics, proper knowledge in the classroom, children who can read fluently, write properly, understand numbers. That sounds obvious, but it's not what the system is currently delivering. And that's why we'd replace the curriculum with excellence with a curriculum for aspiration, something clearer, more focused, and frankly, more demanding. And we need to stop kidding ourselves about standards. We should be measuring literacy and numeracy properly at key stages and acting early when children fall behind. Right now, we don't even have a clear enough picture. On exams, couldn't be clearer. They matter. They're fair. And for many children, especially those without support at home, they're the one thing that gives them a genuine chance. So we back exams. And on discipline, because this is where the system has really drifted, we've ended up in a position where disruption is tolerated, exclusions are effectively off the table, and the so-called presumption of mainstreaming is being applied in a way that simply doesn't work for teachers and, crucially, for pupils. So let me be clear, inclusion matters, of course it does, but it cannot come at the expense of every other child in that classroom. So we back head teachers to take control again, real authority, the ability to exclude where necessary, because if one child is persistently disrupting learning, that's just not fair on the other children in the classroom. And yes, we deal with the basics too, like removing mobile phones from classrooms. They're a distraction, everyone knows it. On the attainment gap, we've focused support where it's actually needed, more funding going directly to schools, more targeted at disadvantaged pupils, not disappearing into the bureaucracy. And parents matter. If schools are dealing with sensitive issues, parents should have a say. That's just common sense. But beneath all of this is something simple. Trust teachers, back them, give them control, strip away the nonsense, because this is about restoring something we've lost, standards, discipline, and ambition in our schools, and we shouldn't settle for anything less.
So that was Stephen Kerr, MSP for the Conservatives. What were you thinking about what he was saying, Cameron?
Well, I mean, Stephen Kerr is a very good man in my view, and I want to thank him very much for providing that. I didn't find anything that he said there the slightest bit objectionable. I wondered if he, in talking first of all about reading, writing and numbers and the importance of these things, I wonder if he was picking up on remarks made by Deirdre Brock, MSP, or aspirant MSP, about how she didn't really think that literacy and numeracy were all that important anymore because children had calculators and and mobile phones and things like that. I think that's astonishing that somebody can say that at this particular time. The only thing I would say is that obviously I imagine we both completely agree with the idea of scrapping curriculum for excellence and replacing it with a knowledge-based curriculum. I think that's really, really important. I don't know if I would have called it the curriculum for aspiration. I think I might have called it something like the curriculum for education, because the curriculum for aspiration is a very kind of conservative kind of idea that we aspire. I myself am an extremely humble working class boy who's done good through education. But I do think that aspiration isn't the sole purpose of education. Retitling that might mislead people a bit. But everything else that was said there about giving teachers much more control over, head teachers much more control over disciplinary situations, banning mobile phones. These are all things which seem to me to be eminently sensible. And they, to be fair, they do recur in some other parties' policies.
Yeah, and I think he made reasonable points that we would completely agree with in terms of discipline.
Oh, completely.
And, giving head teachers the power to exclude continually disruptive pupils.
And the review of mainstreaming of
Yeah.
ASN pupils. I mean, that actually is probably the most basic thing.
Yeah.
The most basic thing is to return to calm classrooms.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of good sense in there
Yeah.
indicating that could happen. The return to calm classrooms, one of the things about it is that returning to calm classrooms, deciding what you're going to do with mainstream pupils, it does involve a bit of money, but it's nothing like as expensive as some of these other policies that people are talking about. And at what cost do we continue having disrupted classrooms?
And of course, it's all very well us sitting here pontificating about what's in party manifestos, and it's probably worth making the point, or I certainly want to make the point, that every party manifesto I've probably ever read in the last 40 years is never followed through particularly well. So these are sound bites, and we have to bear that in mind because everything has usually a cost attached.
Well, I think as in education, as with anything else on parties' manifestos, I think voters have to decide which things realistically are going to happen. Because otherwise they're effectively voting for pie in the sky.
Yeah.
And I think there's a tremendous danger of that in the education manifestos, although some of them include things which actually wouldn't cost anything, and some of them include things which in the long term certainly would save money.
Well, I think the exclusion one is probably top of my list.
Definitely.
In terms of zero cost attached to that.
Well, there is the question of what you do with the excluded pupils.
Yeah.
I think if you're going to take a really troubled ASN child, exclude them from mainstream school, you've got to decide how you're educating them, because this is a long-term thing. It's a long-term problem. So it does require a great deal of restructure.
There has to be some provision.
There definitely has to be provision.
Yeah,
yes.
we would agree with that. Okay, so next on the list, having seen Conservatives, but again, alphabetically would be the Greens, but
Sadly, alas, the Greens did not respond to our request for such a soundbite.
No.
That's good in a way, because it means we don't have to be particularly nice about the Greens, because they've not actually done us any kind of favour. Now, the Greens manifesto, I'll just run through a few things that are actually on the Greens manifesto. First of all, they're going to put a property tax on private schools.
Well, of course, that is, fundamentally one of the most important policies that any political party could come up with. If you're going to produce an education manifesto, top of the list, clearly has to be
damage private schools.
Let's just close them all down.
But the difficulty is, I'd have a lot more respect for this if they actually said, we won't allow private education.
Yes.
That's something that you and I need to talk about. We should talk about this on an edition sometime where we talk about private schools, which we've actually not done one on private schools yet. So we should do that at some point. But the idea that this kind of death by 1,000 cuts removes private schools, I mean, is that the idea? Is the idea to get more money out of private schools? Because VAT on private school fees has failed as a policy. It was a bad policy to begin with, and it's failed as a policy. It's not generating money. If you put a property tax on private schools, well, it depends on the nature of the property tax, because, it's completely unique, this. There's no property tax of that nature on other businesses. No. So at the end of the day, are they talking about what, a reintroduction of rates? Private schools are already paying business rates. So what is it they're actually talking about in terms of a property tax on private schools? But certainly it will be damaging. It will shut things down. The fees will have to go up. Yeah. Private schools will become more elite. The people who run the country, who come out of private schools, will therefore be less connected with the lives of ordinary people. And all of that will have been done more or less single-handedly by Ross Greer.
Yeah. But the hidden intended outcome is the closure of the independent sector, I think. And I would ethically, morally, much prefer a political party to say that's the end goal. We don't believe in independent education for any child. Yeah. We want our education system to be the best in the world, cutting edge, and we're going to provide the funds to do that, blah, 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 blah. Come out and say it.
Yes,
Be honest.
I agree with that. There are countries which quite survive perfectly well without an independent education sector.
Because their own independent sector is so good.
Yes,
their own
exactly.
education sector.
Exactly. And at this particular moment in Scotland is maybe not a very good one to further damage independent schools. But interestingly, they also suggest things that sound very, very appealing to teachers. So, for example, they suggest reducing class sizes to 20. They suggest reducing teachers' class contact time to 20 hours a week. Now, the problem is, this is the pie in the sky of which we spoke earlier. I mean, we all know teachers in primary sector and in the secondary sector who have classes of more than 30.
Yeah.
So to cut classes all to 20, they'd be building more school buildings, they'd be employing a great many more teachers, they'd have to employ a great many more classroom assistants, they'd have to expand, in all sorts of ways. And at the same time, they're cutting teachers' contact hours. This whole thing, I mean, it's difficult to estimate, but I would have thought this whole thing would cost somewhere between a further 50 and 100% of the education budget.
Yep.
So it's just not going to happen.
No.
So effectively, it's a lie, and that's a real problem, I think.
Well, of course, they might argue that the money will come from taxing the super wealthy.
Well, that's you, Rod. So I can't really comment on being super wealthy because I'm not super wealthy. But I mean, Rod's just been complaining about tax, I have to say, just before we started, and about, the vast lumps of money that he makes. But at the end of the day, I don't grudge Rod that, because he does work very hard.
But you see, this is this word aspiration that we also discussed. To have an aspirational society, you have to make sure the business actually works for the people that are running them. Anyway.
Well, I mean, one thing I'm going to say, however, is the Greens do say that they want to have more attention paid to ASN pupils. Yeah. They say that additional support needs teaching should be a promoted post, and I quite like that idea. I mean, in some schools, of course, additional support needs teachers do get paid more, but I think that making that standard across the board is actually quite a good idea.
Well, there are two things in the Greens manifesto that actually we have implemented at Clifton Hall.
One of them will be the Independent Pupil Union to increase pupil voice.
No.
Because, of course, a lot of schools have that.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of schools, that's just another word for a pupil council.
Exactly.
I mean, schools have pupil councils. It's just, the Independent Pupil Union will take its industrial rights and we will be walking out.
Yes.
The pupils will be walking out to support
industrial action.
Gaza and the trans community. I mean, the point is, it's good for young people to care about these kind of things.
Yeah.
But
they've got a voice.
Education's education, and they've got a voice.
Yeah, of course they have. No, actually, two things that we've introduced at Clifton Hall: no homework in primary.
Yeah. Well, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we are this year introducing play-based learning to the age of 6, nearly 7.
Yeah, I agree with that, actually. I agree with the idea of introducing play-based learning. And I think at some point, again in the future, we should get an expert or two in to talk about that.
Yeah.
For neither of us is that really our strongest suit, I would say.
No.
But I mean, I think that basically that is quite an interesting
But at least these are policies based on really strong, firm, global educational research.
Yes. The end of exams, however, at secondary school, that's not such a good idea.
I don't think that's a good idea.
That's all. No, I think that's. I think something in the Green Party in Scotland is a bit obsessed with school exams, and I wonder if it's one or two individuals' private psychological nightmare about exams.
Yeah.
Possibly. It's really, really strange, because there's nothing particularly green about the idea of stopping exams, because the Greens are very keen on social justice, and as you and I know, exams are as close as you get to a level playing field.
Yeah.
The two kids going in to do higher English later this week, sitting in completely different social circumstances, are doing the same exam.
Yeah.
There may have been differences in the quality of their teaching. Yes, the richer one might have had some private tuition, but at the end of the day, that works, whereas ongoing coursework just doesn't work, because ongoing coursework is an absolute gift to the less able middle class child.
Yeah, agreed. Totally.
Let's move on.
Okay. So next on our alphabetical list would be Labour. And we have, I believe,
Paul O'Kane, who is the Labour Party in Scotland's education spokesperson at the moment, a very fine fellow, and he very kindly agreed to say this.
Okay, let's hear.
The young people of Scotland have enormous potential. They are the workers, entrepreneurs and leaders of tomorrow. We know that education has the power to change young people's lives, but Scotland's schools have fallen down the international league tables, and too often a child's background still defines their future. So Scottish Labour will back our children from cradle to career, restoring excellence and equity in our education system and ensuring that every young person has the opportunity to succeed. We will fix the mess by banning mobile phones in classrooms so that schools are safe and calm places for learning once again. We will implement an education recovery programme with up to 2,000 specialist teachers to help children who have fallen the furthest behind, particularly in literacy and numeracy. We will replace the SNP's discredited primary school testing with standardised sample-based testing and international benchmarking. We will support teachers by establishing a proper education workforce plan so that teacher training places are linked to future jobs. We will recruit 1,500 more classroom assistants to help teachers manage behaviour and give pupils more one-to-one support. And we will finally deliver excellence through the curriculum with a focus on knowledge and new national standards for literacy and numeracy. We will improve attendance with family network coordinators as part of our plans to create family support hubs in primary schools based on Sure Start principles. We will also reform the entire landscape in Scotland by transforming Education Scotland into a true education department so it's properly accountable to ministers and tasked with creating a coherent national curriculum with better resources in core subjects for classroom teachers. We will ensure that every young person has the opportunity to go on to an apprenticeship with 9,000 new apprenticeships, if that is what they choose, or to get a good place at college or university so that they can face the world of work and be ready for the future. Scottish Labour is ready to change the face of education in our country so that the next generation can continue to aspire to the promise to do better than the last.
And many thanks to Paul O'Kane for that very articulate rendering of Labour Party policy on education. Interesting, I thought, Rod, that he started with the SNP's failure to close the attainment gap, the poverty-related attainment gap, because closing the poverty-related attainment gap is, of course, a truly wonderful idea.
Yeah.
I mean, if you could actually close the poverty-related attainment gap, that would be wonderful. But, I mean, there are plenty of people out there who don't really understand even what that concept means. Many of them, as far as I can work out, actually are in political parties, and they think closing the knowledge attainment gap really means making people who are less able as the most able people. It's nothing to do with that. It's all to do with money. It's all to do with deprivation. It's the idea that Willie in Dumby Dykes, if he's clever, can do as well as clever Nigel from Morningside, who takes a bus to Clifton Hall every day. Now, these two kids should be doing as well as each other educationally.
Yeah.
The fact that they're not doing as well as each other is a disgrace. The fact that the attainment gap is wider now under the SNP than it was when they came into power is one of the fundamentally disgraceful aspects of this education campaign, and they cannot blame COVID because that has not, to the same extent, affected schools in other countries.
Yeah, and of course, SNP said judges on education. Nicola, education.
I think she said she'd put her neck or her head or some part of her body on the chopping
on a block.
On the chopping block. That's not happened yet.
No.
It's not happened yet.
No, well, they went very quiet, didn't they?
Yes.
I think they had, other problems to face.
I think, to be completely fair, and not just to go off on a rant as I am minded to, the closure of the poverty-related attainment gap was not ever going to be done in schools, really done in schools. It could have been improved through schooling. But
I think
dealing with poverty, if you want to, you have to deal with poverty to really deal with the poverty-related attainment gap. And to be further fair to the SNP, and I'm gritting my teeth when I'm saying this, Rod, the introduction of the child payment probably did more in favour of closing the poverty-related attainment gap in schools than anything that was done in schools. But that's not the whole secret. A lot of their policies, SNP policies, have militated against the closure of the poverty-related attainment gap, particularly to do with behaviour and discipline in schools, and particularly to do with their apparent willingness to let children not go to school, be ill, be off with stress, and wander around school buildings not being educated at all, because among those children will be the very poorest in our society.
And I think the two parties who've spoken so far have quite eloquently expressed the fact for a knowledge-based curriculum.
Absolutely.
And I think that is also key. I can't tell you the number of parents that have spoken to me in the past who've moved their child from a particular school because their maths homework was to design a sock on Minecraft for their maths homework.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing
poster.
just makes me just go absolutely mental. And I don't mean in the mathematical sense. I just really almost lose the plot.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, at the end of the day, there are teachers who are being more or less made to do these things through largely as a result of Curriculum for Excellence, where the standard is so low that it becomes kind of embarrassing, really, to consider that this is part of the educational landscape of this country. I mean, one thing we should pick up on that was a precise figure. First of all, there's this bidding war for classroom assistants, where
right.
you know the Tories have bid 1,000, Labour are bidding 1,500, and it will come as no surprise to everybody that later on the Lib Dems pledged 2,000 new pupil support assistants. We'll talk about pupil support assistants further on, but Paul O'Kane is talking about 2,000 specialist teachers who are presumably, I'm going to say ASN teachers. That was what the link was.
Yeah.
Now, that is a good idea.
Yes.
If they can be trained, if they can be found and trained. I mean, I'd like a bit of teasing out of that. Are they from existing teacher stock, and are these people who are being specially trained? This is all going in the right direction, I think, for doing away with the presumption of mainstreaming by taking a lot of children, putting them into the hands of specialist teachers in much smaller units, which is, of course, something that everybody who's actually cares about education in Scotland knows needs to happen at some point in the future.
Yeah. And often too frightened to actually say it because the cost is probably abhorrent in terms of their manifestos, their ideas.
I think
Because the reality is they don't have the money.
they don't have the money. And I mean, that point is going to come and recur all the way through. And in some respects, when people are voting, they need to be voting for the party that's saying things which, when you read them, you think, well, that can be done for nothing.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, there are a lot of things that could be done in schools to restore, particularly in the restoration of discipline, that could be done for nothing.
Yeah.
All of these things would, in any case, save a great deal of money later on in terms of things like health, policing, you know, the jail system, social security, all these things,
And we're all knocking Curriculum for Excellence, and it's difficult for the SNP, for example, to knock it because they introduced it. So I think that's an added level to this.
I think that our listeners out there of a certain age, because there are people listening to this who are even older than you and me, will say that actually the SNP didn't introduce Curriculum for Excellence. They inherited the idea and applied it.
They implemented it.
Yes, they implemented it.
2008.
And it is true also that it took quite a long time, even for the Tories, to say anything negative about Curriculum for Excellence.
Well, it takes a while to work out whether it's working or not.
Well, that's true. Baroness Davidson, a while back, said, actually, I think the jury is out on Curriculum for Excellence. And she was absolutely right. Jury's back in. It's failed. It's guilty.
Oh, it's guilty.
It needs to be sent away for life. It needs to be executed to extend this metaphor. Expelled. Yes, good. So anyway, that was the Labour Party. A lot of good sense there. Perfectly sensible. I mean, again, not a word in there that I would disagree with. No. The only thing I'd like is to see where these 2,000 specialist teachers are coming from.
A little bit more flesh on the bones.
I think that's right. I think that's right. There's quite a lot of this. I mean, for all parties, there's quite a lot of this. We need to sort this mess out.
And we're the people to do it.
Apart from the SNP, of course, because they're actually proud of the mess. So.
Yeah, indeed. So alphabetically, we're on to the Lib Dems. And
the Lib Dems.
The Lib Dems. Damned, if you will. And I think it's Willie Rennie.
It is Willie Rennie who's talking to us. He's always been interested in education. Here's Willie Rennie.
There are significant problems with the Scottish education system, which is why the Liberal Democrats have got a long set of proposals that we'd like to implement. But I'm going to focus on just a few areas. First is additional support needs. We're proposing 2,000 new pupil support assistants alongside more specialist staff, including behaviour support, ASN teachers, speech and language therapists, and educational psychologists. Then it's workforce planning. There's major problems with unemployment, underemployment, but also shortages in specialist subjects. we're proposing to make professional additional registration available free to teachers on short-term contracts and 0 hours contracts. Then also providing grants for trainee teachers in hard to recruit subjects like STEM, extending further the proposals, the measures that already exist. And then we're also wanting to allow more teachers to train remotely, encouraging them to remain in the communities from which they come and have found difficulty recruiting staff. And then final is measurement. And measurement is incredibly important, and we've got it so wrong in recent years. We'd like to scrap the SNSAs and return to a sampling-based model, which will allow us to have greater insight into what's happening in every school without actually testing in a league table style fashion every single pupil. And also we welcome the return to Tims and Pearls. But finally, we want to make sure that we're addressing the issue of parity of esteem, something we've been rattling on around for a long time. Now, I think a lot of that comes from the ability to measure what really counts. And if we measure on an equal basis subjects like foundation apprenticeships and other technical and vocational qualifications on an equal basis as hires and advanced hires, then we have a chance of making sure that we create an education system that values all sorts of learning that is suitable for every single pupil.
Now, parity of esteem at the end there, very, very interesting point. And I am no doubt that you and I would agree about that the part of the problem of the Scottish education system is that I think really due to the the good intentions of the left, including the SNP and the Labour Party over the years, we've got this idea somehow that the best way to help disadvantaged people is for them to get qualifications and go to university.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think increasingly that is not true, that very often that can work, but in lots of other circumstances it simply doesn't. And it's actually better for us to be thinking much more about apprenticeships and about helping people into the workplace and making sure they have satisfying, well-paid jobs. So I absolutely agree about parity of esteem. Again, there, Lib Dems saying not just hosts of pupil support assistants, but more support for ASN children, specialist teachers, EdSAGs, speech and language therapists, etc. I think that's all good. That is maybe some of the flesh that we are looking for from other parties, how they would actually do that. I'm just going to mention also one thing that's in the Lib Dem manifesto that Willie didn't talk about, because it's a bit of bee in my bonnet. The Lib Dems talk about expanding the provision of extracurricular activities with particular entitlement for disadvantaged children. I think if that was done right, it could be life-changing for some young people.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. I think that's been probably the major failing since the teacher strikes of the 80s, is the lack of extracurricular provision provided by teachers who care.
Yes, and this is, I mean, just to be completely even-handed about it, this is the only party, I think, that mentions extracurricular provision. There are mentions of music. The Tories say that they will give free music lessons for all school children in Scotland, which was a policy at one time, which I think I'm right in saying has been removed.
Yep.
Although the SNP is now saying that it would do it again, having removed it. I think I'm right in saying. I don't think all children in Scotland can get free music lessons. And the Tories also talking about supporting PE in schools, following on from Liz Smith's outdoor education, overnight outdoor education thing, which I think was a great bill and which I think has cross-party support, very broadly speaking. But extracurricular activity is really important.
Not much mention of curriculum, though, was there?
I don't think there was any mention of curriculum, actually. But to be fair, well, he did talk about teacher grants for STEM subjects.
Yeah.
So that was something. And that's a very interesting argument, whether or not teachers in minorities, well, not minority, in, what's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah, less favoured.
Less favoured. Yeah, there's a word, though.
There is a word.
Well, there's a word.
Yeah.
Shortage subjects, let's call them.
Yes.
Should, and STEM subjects should be paid more. And
Less well endowed.
Oh, God. Yeah. Yeah,
Well, it's true.
I don't know what you're saying about physics teachers. Anyway, the bottom line is that, yes, I think probably that is necessary in some respects, at least as a short-term thing to get people into the teacher. And I'm not so sure about remote training.
No.
I just wonder how that would work. That sort of suggests that they're going to be in the schools, in their community, learning to teach, and that the non-placement aspects of teacher training would take place remotely. I need to think about that. Do you have a view?
Well, I'm not really sure what remotely means.
Well, I think it means that they don't go to teacher training college. They don't go to universities, effectively, to do their teacher training. Or that bit of it is done remotely, i.e. online. I'm guessing that's what it means.
Well, if it means online, well, I'm not keen.
Yeah, I think probably I'm not either. Although I do think that teacher training should be moved into schools. I think reform teacher training was, of course, one of the Rod and Cameron things.
Absolutely.
It's not, Willie's the only person, Willie Rennie is the only person that was even talking about that, as far as I can remember.
Yeah. Can I tell you a piece of really fascinating insight that I received the other day?
You probably can.
Based on some recent educational research, that for the first time in our written history, in other words, probably since parish education in Scotland started, this generation of pupils are falling below the standard of the generation that went before. And that's the first time it's happened.
Is that the Scottish? That's
global.
That's global, right?
Yeah. And the research suggests, wait for it, that it has nothing to do with mobile phones. It has nothing to do with lockdown. The research shows that at the moment, and the research is ongoing, but the first finding, what you might call significant finding in terms of numbers, is the introduction of digital technology in schools.
Wow. We're all going to die is basically my response to that. It is an extraordinary piece of information.
And it's literally come out in the last 2 to 3 weeks.
It's Deirdre Brockism at its worst, isn't it? You know, we don't really need this because we've got digital technology now to do all this for us.
Yeah.
We can just sit in a seat and watch YouTube and TikTok and eat unhealthy foods.
And we don't need to think critically.
And eventually, when we can't get a job, the state will look after us because we're stressed at the very thought of getting out of our chair.
But think of the number of governments that have flooded schools with digital technology, saying it's the place to go.
Tell you this, Rod, there was no digital technology in my classroom.
No, there wasn't any.
Just me, the blackboard, and the bell. No, there wasn't the belt. Actually, I never used the belt on every. No. Let's move along.
Yeah, anyway, sorry.
There was something I was just going to. What was that I was going to say about the Lib Dems? Well, interestingly, I think the Greens, of course, aren't going to.
He didn't mention the play-based learning up until the age of 7, did he?
No, he didn't mention the play-based learning. It's in the manifesto. Yes, yeah, and I think that's another interesting point. He also didn't mention, I don't think it's in their manifesto, anything to do with mobile phones. I find that quite hard to believe because it's such a
topic, isn't it?
I mean, I may have missed it in the manifesto, and I apologise if I have. It's because the Tories, the SNP, the Labour Party, and Reform all saying that they'll ban mobile phones in schools. Personally, I would still let the kids keep them in their pockets. If they can't do that, then there are disciplinary methods of ensuring that they do it the next time.
Yeah, this just is not an issue that's ever really got me very excited.
Well, I think it gets people excited in the classroom when kids are sitting looking at TikTok on their mobile phone where they're supposed to be listening to you teach. But on the other hand, I can't understand how that happens.
That's not really about the mobile phone.
It's not about the mobile phones. It's about a situation in which your head teacher will not back you up if you take that phone off a child. And it's just about common sense and courtesy and discipline and about what education's for. It's much less. The mobile phones are a kind of
it's a really lazy excuse, I think. For poor behaviour or whatever. It's nothing to do with mobile phones. It's to do with the people who are in charge and their discipline policy and how they deal with it on a day-to-day basis, individual basis. In fact, there's incredibly good learning can come from children making mistakes by misuse of a mobile phone. It gives you the opportunity to bring them in and say, "You've done this. Do you realise the potential consequence of that action down the line?" They're meant to be educators.
Well, yeah. I mean, but yeah. I mean, I mean, never a word that Rod speaks do I disagree with.
Oh, Cameron.
We're going to move along now on to
next in the
reform.
would be reform. R coming before S for the last part of SNPA. So reform
good.
first.
Very good. See, there's a really crucial point about this. It's sort of almost organic, this. Rod is literate, so he knows that R comes before S.
I know the alphabet.
Rod knows the alphabet.
Because in my primary one classroom, the alphabet was right round the wall.
But you can, of course, just get the alphabet by looking on your phone.
Oh, you could.
You could.
now.
In fact, I'm sure that it could speak it out to you.
AI would tell
So
you.
if you wanted to know which letter came first, R or S, you could just ask Grog. On we go.
Right.
So here is...
So this is for reform is Malcolm Lord Offord. And this is what Malcolm had to say to us.
Scottish education was once the gold standard of the world, but in the last 20 years has plummeted from being outstanding to just average. Our state schools are in crisis. Out of just over 700,000 children of school age, close to 230,000 don't attend school regularly. Parents are disillusioned with the curriculum for excellence, and in special needs provision, the SNP policy of inclusion has been exposed as an illusion. Head teachers are discouraged to exclude disruptive pupils, and they're not in control of their school budgets or their teacher recruitment choices. Staff morale is at an all-time low, and the attainment gap between rich and poor children is widening, not closing. Reform UK will set out a number of policies. Number one, we will reboot the curriculum for excellence by giving it a knowledge-based curriculum at its core. Two, we will restore rigorous examination as the primary method of assessment combined with standardised testing. Three, we will reintroduce the Scottish Survey of Literacy and Numeracy and rejoin all international education surveys. Four, we will give discretion back to head teachers over their school budgets and staff recruitment. Five, we will ban mobile phones in classrooms. And six, we will allow all secondary schools to apply for the self-governance model used by Jordan Hill College School. In particular, reform will provide advanced support to head teachers in maintaining discipline in the classroom by using exclusion as an essential tool. Neither pupils nor teachers are helped by having to endure bad behaviour, and misbehaving pupils must be taught there are consequences for disruptive activity. In summary, reform's ambition is to reinvigorate our state-funded schools to ensure that young Scots are given early and clear pathways into productive jobs in the new economy based around our 10 centres of excellence. Rather than sending half of school leavers to universities, instead we will direct them into trades via technical colleges with multi-year funding, thereby building meaningful career pathways that will be relatively AI-proof and create the most value for themselves, their families and their communities.
Well, just to say also, because we've actually not used the Education Scotland words yet, in their manifesto, Reform say that they will abolish Education Scotland. And they do go on to say, and return power to the Scottish Government. I'm not really very sure what that means, because, of course, power in Scottish schools, a fact which Jenny Gilruth is very fond of reminding us, lies with local education authorities. And I don't know if necessarily they're going to ban local education authorities as well. But I can't really see how the Scottish Government itself could have power over education. But that apart,
well,
the difficulty is he doesn't say anything that anyone could really disagree with.
No, can I say, I think what he said there was probably set out in a really clear, honest manner. And if we think back to his 6 points that he makes, not one of those actually costs a penny, because it's about an ideology, it's about discipline, it's about knowledge-based curriculum, banning mobile phones. I mean, all six. There wasn't really, we're not talking extra millions of pounds to actually implement those six
Well, I think that there would be a big cost in terms of this transformational thing that he's talking about, which is getting people on leaving school, a larger proportion of them, into what he calls technical colleges. And
Yeah, although he came to that later. That wasn't one of his 6 points.
No, fair enough. I mean, the interesting thing is, he sounds a bit, in some respects, like your granddad talking about education.
Yeah.
You know, this is what we ought to do. I mean, of course, teachers should have power in their classroom. Of course, head teachers should be in charge of the thing. Of course, it should be about knowledge. Of course, young people should feel proud to be leaving school and going into a trade. Of course, it's ridiculous for children to be using a mobile phone in the classroom when the teacher's teaching them. Yeah. Now, the trouble is, on the one hand, I cannot really think that Scotland's ever going to be educationally like that again. But I also think that everything that he says is absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Does that make me want to go and vote reform? Well, that's a matter for me and my conscience, but I'll just tell you now, hundreds of listeners out there who might conceivably just be 10% interested in this, I will not be voting for reform just because of their education policies. And I doubt if a lot of teachers will vote for reform, because there's a leper aspect to it, that you're not touching reform with a barge pole. But it's very difficult to see why any of these policies should not be implemented by whoever is in control in the next government.
No, I would go further. I would say they should be implemented.
They should be implemented.
And I'm exactly on the same page with you. The idea of voting reform is somewhat uncomfortable, lies uncomfortably with me. But in terms of what Malcolm Offord was saying there about education, this felt a bit like you saying, oh, it's the granddad philosophy. For me, it just feels like common sense. It just feels like common sense. Sort out discipline.
Well, that's always the argument. The argument here is that neither you nor I really think that education's got much to do with politics.
No.
Education's about doing something. Education, in my view, has got no more to do with politics than the issue of how you do a heart transplant. Yeah. I mean, there are ways of doing heart transplants. Now, obviously, politics engages with that because the National Health Service has to pay for it, that has to be funded, and so on and so forth. But once you get down to the nitty-gritty, it's up to a dedicated team of very experienced people to carry out the heart transplant. And if it costs £100,000, probably more these days, to do a heart transplant, then so be it.
Yeah.
Education's the same.
Yeah.
I mean, there in the classroom, we know how the best ways to do things are. We're not confused by the educational jargon and philosophies of academics in ivory towers in universities talking about all sorts of things that actually aren't very relevant to getting wee Jimmy reading, writing, numerate and getting him his hires. Yeah. I mean, you know, and that therefore, you know, is probably in lots of respects why when Malcolm Offord says these things, we all just go, yeah, that's just common sense.
It's common sense.
Your granddad spoke a lot of common sense. Neatly though, brings us on to the government in power.
Oh, the bottom of the alphabetical list.
The bottom of the alphabetical list.
And maybe not just the alphabetical list.
Let's just try and keep even-handed here. Right. Because it is very likely, as we sit here today, that the SNP will be in power either by themselves, either in a minority government, or with a majority, or with in power with somebody else. And it's not really for us to speculate as to who that might be. But
it's a bit like, let's be honest, Labour got in with a landslide, not because of what their policies were, but because the Tories made such an absolute hash of it.
Yeah, but that's not happening this time.
No, and now this time, the SNP are going to probably get in potentially with a majority, because the opposition are in disarray.
Yeah, I think, I mean, this is slightly off the point of two heads are better than one, but all I would say was, I think if the Holyrood election had taken place before the Westminster election, the SNP would probably be in power. I mean, and they always certainly must know that. Now, to be fair, we obviously got in touch with the SNP, but the SNP declined to take part. Or didn't respond to our...
total silence.
From both of us, actually. Both of us tried.
Yeah.
However, I'm just going to read a few things that are in the SNP manifesto, just to be fair.
Are you going to put the bag at the top of that?
Oh, well, no, the bag comes. The bag comes. The bag. I think we should end with the bag.
Oh, okay, right.
I'll end with the bag. End with a bang.
Yeah.
A bang and a bag. So empower head teachers to have greater say in the education their school provide. Review the provision of modern languages. That's new. We've not talked about that. Ban mobile phones. The Dolly Parton Library.
Oh, yeah.
Access to behaviour specialist teachers. Support development of specialist training for teachers in special schools. Now, that last one is interesting. Support development of specialist training for teachers in special schools, because it does hint towards a reconsideration of the presumption of mainstreaming.
Yeah.
If you've got special schools, I mean, they've more or less done away with special schools.
But why hint?
Yeah.
This is what drives me bananas.
Well, they're hinting.
Come out and say it.
They're hinting
Tell us.
because they would otherwise have to say, we introduced the presumption of mainstreaming. It hasn't worked.
Well, they're in a
so
bit-
we're going to go back to special schools. All it says is we're going to tinker. Now, one of the problems with all of this is, will any of it happen? So they talk about empowering head teachers to have greater say in the education their school provide.
Well, we could have done that yesterday.
Well,
Do it right now.
they have centralised education. I mean, it's got worse.
Of course it has.
You know, I mean, Education Scotland is a bloated enterprise that achieving absolutely nothing, fully backed by the SNP.
Yeah.
The SNP has never shown interest in what head teachers and teachers think.
No.
I mean, not that long ago, they were running, 5 committees to redesign the curriculum, and none of them contained any teachers back in the day. Reviewing the provision of modern languages, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that more children will be doing modern languages? Does it mean that they will be better taught? Does it mean the courses, which are dreadful, actually, I think dreadful modern languages courses in Scotland, will improve? And then, of course, there is the bag. Now,
Oh, yes. Sorry, there was a spoiler alert. I should have given a spoiler alert.
well, the bag.
I let it out of the bag, didn't I?
Well, yeah, you let it
I did.
The rod got out of the bag.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the bag just sums this up slightly at this point in the election. A sort of slight feeling coming into the opinion polls the SNP aren't doing just as well as they were earlier. That's bound to happen, really. Things always tighten as the election approaches. And they're just clawing for a policy. And so one of the policies that they came up with was this idea that every 5-year-old in the country, everybody joining P1, would get a school bag full of bits of stationery, essential stationery items.
I'd have been very excited by that as a 5-year-old.
You would have been excited by it until, I mean, my problem with it is logistical. I don't particularly mind children having a lot of stationery items. I'd far rather it was targeted towards poorer kids. I mean, I'd far rather they just said some schools will have them and some schools won't.
Yeah.
Because, but they don't like doing that.
No.
So it does mean, it'd be interesting to see if it applies in the private sector. It won't, but it'd be interesting to see if when they actually spell that out. All children in Scotland going into P1 will get one of these bags. No, they won't. 94% of children going into state schools will get one of those bags. Yeah. What happened to these bags? I don't think that 28 kids are going to turn up, or 20 kids, if there's a Green government, 20 kids are going to turn up in your primary 1 class with exactly the same bag. That just doesn't...
Well, they'd have to be named.
They'd have to be named, but is there going to be a compulsion to use that bag? Or can you use the capybara bag that Granny gave you?
No, I don't know.
Well, I think...
They could be disciplined.
No, I think I'd use a place to keep your mobile phone. I think that's going to be the issue. The issue is going to be...
Well, can I
Yes.
paraphrase this?
Yes.
What my thinking is.
Yes.
For me, any policy, any money spent, has to have a positive outcome.
Yes.
Giving kids a stationery set at the beginning of primary 1 isn't going to affect their future career aspirations and their educational ability. In other words, educational impact, I think, is zero.
Yeah, I mean, just give.
So it's a gimmick.
Give primary 1 teachers lots of stationery.
Give it.
I mean, it doesn't need to be a thing that's been voted on. The Scottish bag. It just made. I mean, I made in my piece about this last week in the paper. I made the point that it's not the same thing as the baby box.
No.
The baby box is a private thing.
Yeah.
So the baby box arrives having cost whatever it costs, quite a lot of money.
Yeah.
But I think that's quite a nice idea.
I do as well.
And I can see that, but it does mean that, if you've got a baby, there's the baby box. It's your baby box. You can decide what you do with it. the bag's going out on the back of your 5-year-old.
Yeah.
And when your 5-year-old realizes that Clarissa next to him has got Granny's capybara bag, you can bet they'll be wanting rid of their SNP made in China bag.
Do you think they'll have an SNP label?
Oh, no. Couldn't possibly do that. It's a glorious thought. I was wondering about a thistle, maybe.
Oh, a thistle.
Something
Something very
Scottish. Or a St Andrew's cross, maybe. You know, that will be a really interesting thing. But I just love the idea of being a primary school teacher and saying, you know, Rod, where's your bag? You know, oh, that's my bag. That's my bag. That's my bag. This is my pencil. That's my pencil. He's got my pencil. But it's not all the same.
Cameron, I never spoke like that.
Yeah, you don't.
Not even at age 5.
Actually, he speaks like that quite a lot these days. But that's not really something we talk about.
No.
Right, so we've taken a trawl through party policies.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, some of what these politicians were saying may have surprised people. But all we can say, I think, reasonably, is that whatever party you vote for, please consider their education policy.
Yeah.
Education's the big open goal in this election. Not all that convinced that the opposition teams are playing that ball as hard as they could.
It feels to me like education has kind of fallen off the cliff as an issue.
It has.
It's all about, and I understand why, cost of living. I think the immigration thing is a tiny thing in Scotland, big in Glasgow.
Third biggest cause of concern to the Scottish voter after cost of living in the National Health Service is immigration. I also find that extraordinary.
Yeah, but I think that's Glasgow based. Big population in Glasgow, and 6 times the level of immigration of any other city.
Yeah. Let's be careful not to stray into the immigration argument.
But I think that's impactful, and that's probably why that comes higher up the list. Because I find that extraordinary that immigration would be an issue for Scots.
Rather than education.
Rather than education.
I mean, it's really demoralising, actually, in all sorts of respects, that the conversation has been driven to that extent. Let us remember that Tony Blair, now a sort of sainted figure in the Labour Party, or in British politics, somebody who I never liked very much, but he did say in one election, this election is about 3 things: education.
Yeah.
You know, now whether he did much about that when he came into power, who knows? But really, this election should be about education. And it's not.
It really isn't.
No, it really isn't.
And it's the one area, I think, in Scotland that is, well, I think, going back to Malcolm Offord, I think he's right. Scottish education was revered across the world.
I think,
not so long ago.
Again, I think that he was the one who said that. I think that probably the truth of the matter is that all the centrist parties would say the same thing, that the decline of Scottish education is disastrous. The difficulty that the centrist parties have, in a way that Malcolm Offord does not have, is that they are scared to say things that will disturb the educational monolith. Yeah. I think that's true. I think there's a lack of the radical about a lot of these policies. Yeah. Reform can be radical, but then they're not going to be in power. Yeah. So or at least they're very likely not to be going to be in actual power, because they require a majority to do that, I imagine. Yeah. So there we are. By the next time we meet, or the next time we talk to our adoring public, this will all be over. And I won't be all that sorry to see the back of it, actually, I don't think.
No, I've always found elections somewhat unedifying. Because, I think it's true of political classes, not just in Scotland, but across the world. I think there's a huge now kind of distrust of what the political elites say. And so manifestos, I mean, they're laughable. They're laughable because parties do not implement what they say in their manifesto, and of course, they'll blame it on what's gone before, or there was a hidden, lack of budget, or the tax receipts weren't as good as we were led to believe, and it's this and it's that. It's excuses that I really personally would like to see politicians, when they're talking about education, just coming out and saying what everyone knows to be true. What we need, and to say it, and to be convincing, and not just be convincing, but have conviction. And the problem with politics in Scotland today is, I remember, this is going back maybe 6 or 7 years, I watched the full debate in Holyrood about the introduction of standardised testing for Primary 1. And the lack of understanding or knowledge of what standardized testing actually is
Yep.
was mind-blowing.
Yeah.
I sat there gobsmacked as politicians stood up in the chamber pontificating about standardized testing and getting their facts completely wrong.
Yeah.
And nobody arguing because they don't understand. They have no knowledge. But education is, well, our lifetime has been based on the value of education.
Yes.
That's what life's about. Give kids the education they deserve. And Scotland is fundamentally failing to do so. And politicians aren't thinking about it because for some reason it's not in their top 3 list of public, worries.
Well, on that note, voters, let's try and change that by making education matter in this election. We hope you've enjoyed this discussion of the party politics of education in Scotland as the election approaches. And we'll see you next time, although Rod and I don't yet know exactly what we're going to be talking about.
No, but that's quite a common theme, isn't it?
It is quite a common theme.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you once again for listening, and as usual, class dismissed.